The sound of London.
Saturday Breakfast with Carrie and David Grant. BBC
Radio London.
Now, on the 9th of March 1963, the Beatles performed their first ever official London gig at the Granada Cinema in East Ham. According to people who were there at the first gig, the Beatles could barely be heard over the loud screaming of the crowd that night, with John Lennon having to plead with the audience to calm down. Now, the story of that night has been captured in a brand new documentary, Oh, What a Lovely Time. And here to talk to us about it is the producer and the director of the documentary, Neil Cole.
Yeah.
Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So, Neil, where has this footage, if footage it is, where's it been?
Well, obviously in those days, you know, there was no phones. People weren't filming it. The Beatles weren't really anything.
Yes.
So there is no footage. But what's beautiful about this is it's the oral history. Marietta Evans, who's the co-writer and presenter of the documentary, was like a detective, and she found women who were teenagers who got in, who were there at the gig.
That's
and
amazing.
got swept away. You know, we took a trip out to Clacton and met a woman called Valerie, and she was 15. She'd come out of work. She was with a fella, and it was a sort of a date. But the second they went in, like, the girls were screaming, so she just started screaming, and all the women that we've spoken to, they don't know why, they just started screaming.
It's like the theory of hysteria,
like kind of the Salem witch trials. You know, that kind of hysteria just took you over.
When you started on this project, were you already a Beatles fan?
Yeah, so the film itself covers sort of three key things that kind of happened in Newham. In '63, it wasn't even called Newham then. There was East Ham and West Ham, and then Newham, so Newham. And
oh my gosh, it was this moment years old when I've just realised that. Sorry, just having a moment. Carry on.
That's one of the things that I learned in the process of making this film.
Wow,
I know. So
that's amazing.
And the great thing is when you embark on a project like this, it's something that you love and you care about, and you do your research. But every single day you learn something new. The three key sites are the Theatre Royal Stratford East, the Tate Institute just opposite the DLR. Opposite the Tate and Lyle sugar refinery.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
And the Granada East Ham. So those are the three, because all three had something like a magical moment in '63. So the '63 is our year. So there's stories from people that were present in those three places.
Yeah.
It was commissioned by the Royal Docks Learning Activity Centre, funded by National Lottery Heritage, and so we just kind of set about finding people. But of course, we don't have a lot of money, and the Beatles, there's not a lot of footage, and you know, they're quite sort of litigious in terms of using their images.
Yes.
Right,
So
yes, of
we had to
course.
find a way to do it that was about oral history, about
Yeah, I love
telling
that.
people's
The
real
stories.
stories. And it was illuminating every day.
Now, obviously, looking back, everybody has memories that are coloured by subsequent events. You know, the Beatles went on to become the biggest pop band in history, but at that time, they had two hits. You know, and was it Please Please Me, I think, had just been number 2 in the charts. They hadn't had a number 1. What was the cause of the hysteria?
Well, I think it was part of what then went on to become the sort of swinging 60s. I think the youth revolution, the post-war era had been very austere. That part of London was very scarred and troubled.
So lots of bomb sites
still,
in 1963, 18 years after the end of the war. It was a wreck.
So that night, the 9th of March, Saturday the 9th of March, 1963, the Beatles had been on a smaller UK tour. And that was their first tour. And this was the first night of their second UK tour. And it was at the Granada East Ham, which was one of those beautiful Art Deco buildings that's shaped a bit like a boat.
Is it still there now?
Well, that's the thing, is it is. And it's like there are hundreds of these around London, and you might walk past them every day.
Please don't tell me it's a betting shop or something.
No, I mean, it's had a checkered history, like a lot of them. You know, sometimes they were derelict. A lot of times they became bingo halls.
They became bingo halls in the 70s.
Mecca bingo halls.
This one was a bingo hall. Some of them have, you know, been turned back into cinemas. But this one is a flip out. It's an indoor trampolining emporium.
Okay, I know.
And what's amazing, we filmed in there a couple of times, and loads of the original sort of ornate plasterwork is still on the walls.
There.
That's amazing.
And you walk in, and it was a 2,500 seater venue. And you're
Wow.
walking down the Barking Road, and you would never, this
wouldn't
white
know
building,
that.
you wouldn't know. There's no plaque, it's not a listed building. And it's just like one of those amazing Art Deco sort of nautical themed buildings. And inside, they've been quite sort of respectful to so you can stand there. It's on 3 levels now, but
Lovely.
there are certain points you can stand there and look and imagine the Beatles and all the other bands that played there to
It's
screaming
carrying
fans.
that history, yeah. And this is part of the Newham Heritage season. Is it a festival?
Yeah, it's a month of events. So we have our first screening. I mean, the film's still being edited. I was filming something on it yesterday, so it's not finished yet.
Thank you for coming in to see us. I know how hectic that is.
So we have the first screening, which is mainly for contributors, people who've supported us.
Yeah.
We put it out to public, and it kind of sold out very quickly. But it's at the Stratford Hub on the 26th of June. And yeah, it's part of Newham Heritage Month. So they've been very supportive. Royal Docs, this was all born out of, we made a documentary last year, which was about what was a massive stadium in Canning Town, like 120,000 seat stadium for Speedway. And it was knocked down in 72. So speaking to people who were even there was quite tricky. So we already had our work cut out making that film. And then this one kind of followed along because that sort of captured some imagination. But for me, it's the people, it's the oral history. It's the people that were there and didn't realise that they were part of history. Because what you were saying, David, is that they were drilled as a band. They were tight from their years in Hamburg.
Yeah, playing 6 hours.
5 shows a day.
Yeah.
So they were totally drilled. They'd only just recorded "Please Please Me," the album. As you said, they had "Please Please Me," I think had been in the charts, but they hadn't had a number 1 yet.
No.
Suddenly, and so that night on the 9th of March '63, they had, I think it was Tommy Rowe and Chris Montez were 2 crooners. I mean,
That's right. Montez
Yeah.
was Let's Dance, wasn't it?
Yes,
Hey, baby,
exactly.
won't you take a chance? And Chris Rose, Sheila was his big hit.
That's right. And the Beatles were already ruffling their feathers because the Beatles were like 6th on the bill midway through the first half, and already there was like almost a riot
There was
because
a buzz happening.
people just wanted.
They want to see the band.
Yeah, and the headliners were like, "Well, no, we headline." And I think by the time they came back to the Granada in East Ham in November, they'd been bumped up to headliners. So in the space of 7 months,
And it's the takeover from those crooners who were leading the way right up until this point, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely.
So I love this idea of kind of nostalgia documentaries with people's lived
Through the
their
eyes of those who were
stories.
there.
I love that. So what would you do? Where would you go? Where are you going to go next?
I don't know. I mean, I still think there's loads that won't even make it into the edit of this one because we've got to keep it as short as possible. We've got to make it a 5-hour film about this. Like even Theatre Royal Stratford East is a beautiful thing because speaking about Joan Littlewood, who sort of was at that point reinventing modern theatre
Completely.
and like you wouldn't have people like Barbara Windsor coming through, but even
Yes.
what a lot of people don't know, and it's lovely that there's a statue to her outside Stratford East now, but we spoke to people, we found people who were part of her gang of boys that were out in the streets causing trouble.
Yeah.
And she would pull them in, not necessarily to do theatre and dance, just give them jobs to do. They'd put them up a ladder to
She was
paint the
amazing.
set. And
David did What a Lovely World for the National.
Yes,
So he-
that's
when they
loud.
did the revival, so I'm really familiar with it. And Murray Melvin.
if we've
who
still
had
got
been-
time, can we get you on the documentary? I mean, we still haven't picture locked yet.
I love it. I love it.
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
a documentary being made right now.
What was great is that Murray Melvin, who was in the original cast, came down and was raving and telling us all the stories about Joan Littlewood. So it's really fitting that you've combined, you've taken this film and it's part of that whole festival as well.
Neil, thank you so much. If we want any more information, I'm looking on all my notes and I can't see any. Where do we get information on it?
On the Newham Heritage Month website, we have our own event page,
Lovely.
and then you can follow it to links to me and Marietta, it's I think it's the beginning of something. Obviously, we've got the screening, but then after that, we'll try and do other screenings, film festivals, and then
Lovely.
see if we can put it online somewhere.
We look forward to seeing it and hearing it.
Thank
Neil
you
Cole, thank
so
you so
much.
much for being with us this morning.
The Sound.
The sound of London.
Saturday breakfast with Carrie and David Grant. BBC.
Radio London.